We're doing this. Okay, so I'm going to show very specific stuff on scaling and testing your off-grid power system. This is using tools from the Diacruz tool library, most of which I contributed, or about half of which. The other thing is other people are buying the batteries and kind of, have issues with people using up their batteries. So I've pitched into tools, but if you're watching this video and you're a part of this, remember, this is kind of BYOB, bring your own batteries. But one of the things that happens is these appliances, like this light system, this stereo, they have plugs. The plugs for that are on the other side. So pretty much anything that charges a battery is also going to have like a pass-through for plugs. The vacuum cleaner can plug into something, but it will not charge batteries. Now, what we're doing, though, is I'm running a single power cord from the inverter at the power trailer, which I've shown in other videos. This one right here, there's a whole video series. I'll put a link on how I built this. And I actually built this in Portland, Oregon, out here on site. As you can see, we don't have water running here yet. That's my warm wash-up. And so what I have is a single power cord coming out of that. You want to use the thickest power cord you can get a hold of when you're doing this. And preferably not a 100-foot power cord. You lose a lot of energy in that. And on hot days, I'm really having to stop here and make sure my equipment's not overheating. What I have here for the testing is a sample system made out of pretty good components that should on its own power a cabin, okay? And part of the reason for this is if somebody's out here doing construction either at this cabin or another cabin or one of the other little site locations we're establishing out here, we're making it where they have power available, okay? So I hold up an old, we have vacuum cleaners and dishwashers and other types of appliances that are cheap, easy to get when they're a little beat up, especially in the city, and we haul them out here. And those appliances may deteriorate very quickly if they're on an inverter all the time, but if somebody's out here for just a couple of weeks at a time, it's going to do just fine long term. So what I have here is a Schneider electric or Xantrex, same stuff, charge controller. This one's the C40. Now, I also use a C35 and a C60 on some other applications. I've got the Harbor Freight 3 kW inverter. Now, there's a few reasons I went with the 3 kW instead of a 5 kW. And the 2 kWs I've made a decision not to use. They're almost powerful enough, but not quite. And the 2 kW ones can choke on some more powerful power tools, although they'll work if you have enough battery juice. What I have in here is a deep cycle marine battery. So this single box can act as a single system, but that battery, all that's really going to do is regulate the power flow to the inverter. You have to have a battery in a system, even if your panel power production is equal to or more than what you're using. What I have is 400 watts of Solarland power panels. These are at 100 watts each, but they tend to run hot when they're relatively new. These have a very long warranty, so they talk about being on warranty for a few years, several years into their service life. So even though this is officially only about 24 amps of power, this same array, when it was mounted on a mobile workshop trailer, had burned out not 2, but 3 30 amp charge controllers. When I moved it up to a 35 amp charge controller, and I switched from the net meter solar, and then there was a Harbor Freight one, it didn't burn out. I pulled that off as soon as I figured out what the capacity on it actually was, and it wasn't 500 watts. When I went to a 35 amp Schneider or Xantrex, it seemed to work okay. When I retrofitted this into a more mobile system, I went with a 40 amp to play it safe. But I'm assuming that with a 40 amp charge controller, I could, let's say, move up to 3 of the DM solar panels, which is going to produce around 450, 460 watts instead of 400. The second box over there is just full of batteries. So I've got 5 deep cycle marine batteries. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, what's the amps on the batteries? That's kind of a loaded question when you're talking about cold cranking amps versus long-term storage or deep cycle amps. That's really a loaded question. But let's just say that if something's roughly the size of a car battery, we're just going to thumbnail it and we're going to say it's a 100 amp battery. Even though I think they're like 1200 amp starting power or something like that, and then it's lower for long term. What you really want to be doing is hovering in your upper and bottom, let's say 15-20% of that, preferably 10% of that. And so this would be a typical small cabin setup, but probably not going to do you a lot of good in the winter time. Now, right now we're in the summer in the Pacific Northwest, and I get a lot of sunlight out here. It's 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. almost, but our actual sunlight is tending to stop at around 8:30 at night. There's a little bit of indirect light in the sky. Right now I'm getting maximum skylight, and what I have to do is test, can I keep appliances going at night? So I'm running a single power cord, and again, we really want to keep that down to 50 feet. We can do it with 100 foot, but that's pushing it. So, a cabin really ought to be located within 50 feet of sunlight. Right now, this is in the shade during part of the day, but I've got kind of a surplus of power. And what I'm figuring out is maybe, somewhere out in this little field is where a permanent array would go. But that's going to be 1 or 2 years out. And we just have to look at the sun cycle, because sometimes having an east-west orientation on your panels, just buying more panels and having an east-west orientation is going to do you more good than a south-only orientation. And what I'm figuring out personally, I'm just going with a southwest orientation on these, and there's other factors that we put into that. What time of day are you using the most power? We really just want to be using that panel power when we're working and when we're productive. I'm not an early morning person. For the early morning work that I'm doing here, I'm using battery powered tools, so I really don't need to produce that power. So I really don't need an eastward facing array. If I have a southward facing array, then okay, I get a little bit of power all day long, but believe it or not, that thing's only optimized in the noontime. With a southeast facing array, I get the entire afternoon into the evening, and those are the times when I'm going to be maybe wanting to use this power saw right here, and those are the times I'm going to maybe be using more plug-in power tools. The rest of the time I'm getting by with battery. Now, appliances vary a lot, especially when you're using the older surplus style appliances. This was donated from a Mexican restaurant in Portland, Oregon. And of course, here I have it stocked with survival essentials.